Black teen's viral video on faith moves millions. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room made everything feel unreal. Marcus Johnson, a black teenager with close-cropped hair and tired eyes, stared at his phone in disbelief. The video he'd posted just 3 hours ago, a raw, unfiltered moment of prayer beside his grandmother's hospital bed, had somehow reached 2 million views and was climbing by the second. His hands trembled as he scrolled through thousands of comments. "This young man's faith just saved my life tonight. I haven't prayed in 30 years, I just did. Watching this with my grandson, we're both in tears." A notification pinged. CNN wanted permission to share his video. Another ping, a national talk show wanted him as a guest. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Marcus looked up as Dr. Reynolds, the attending physician who had earlier sneered at Marcus's grandmother and dismissed her symptoms, approached with an entirely different demeanor. The doctor's face was ashen, his clipboard clutched tightly against his chest. "Marcus," Dr. Reynolds said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to speak with you about your grandmother." Marcus stood, his heart pounding. The millions of viewers, the viral fame, none of it mattered now. All that mattered was whether his grandmother would survive the night. "Is she?" Marcus couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Reynolds placed a hand on the teenager's shoulder. "I've never seen anything like it in 30 years of medicine. The stroke should have." His voice cracked. "She's asking for you." Marcus stared at the doctor in shock, remembering how just hours ago this same man had practically laughed at his grandmother's symptoms and suggested it was probably just anxiety in these people. But let's go back to how this all started. It was just 3 hours earlier when Marcus had arrived at his grandmother's small house for their weekly Sunday dinner. The autumn sunlight filtered through the curtains of Eleanor Johnson's modest home in Oakwood Heights, a neighborhood that had seen better days. At 78, Eleanor, known to everyone as Miss Ellie, moved more slowly than she once did, but her kitchen still came alive every Sunday as she prepared dinner for her only grandson. Marcus Johnson, 17 and lanky with the beginnings of a beard he was immensely proud of, let himself in through the back door as he always did. "Grandma, it's me," he called out, the familiar scent of her famous pot roast welcoming him home. Miss Ellie appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, the same one she'd worn for Sunday dinners as long as Marcus could remember. "There's my boy," she said, her face lighting up. "Right on time for once." Marcus bent down to hug her small frame, noticing how she seemed even more fragile than the week before. "Need any help? You can set the table," she said, returning to the kitchen. "Your mother called. She's stuck at the hospital again, double shift." Marcus nodded, used to his mother's absence. Diana Johnson was a dedicated nurse at Mercy General, working long hours since Marcus's father had walked out 12 years ago. It was Miss Ellie who had really raised Marcus, filling the gaps left by his mother's demanding schedule. As Marcus arranged the plates, the good china Miss Ellie insisted on using for Sunday dinners, he glanced at the wall of photos chronicling their family history. His grandfather in his army uniform during Vietnam, his mother's graduation from nursing school, his own baby pictures. And prominently displayed in the center, a photo of Miss Ellie as a young woman marching with Dr. King in Selma. "You're quiet today," Miss Ellie observed as they sat down to eat. "School trouble?" Marcus shook his head. "No, it's just..." He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "I made this video for my social studies project about faith and how it shaped our community during the civil rights movement. I interviewed Pastor Wallace and Mrs. Tanner from church." "And you want my stories too?" Miss Ellie finished for him, a knowing smile on her face. "If you don't mind," Marcus said. "Your experiences, what you lived through, it matters, Grandma. People my age need to hear it." Miss Ellie considered this as she served the pot roast. "What's the video for?" "Just a class assignment," Marcus said, "but I was thinking of maybe posting it online too." Miss Ellie raised an eyebrow. "Those social media things where people dance around and act foolish," Marcus laughed. "Not exactly, but I think your story could help people, not just kids in my class." They ate in comfortable silence for a moment before Miss Ellie spoke again. "Your grandfather would have loved to see the man you're becoming." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Always said you had an old soul." After dinner, they settled in the living room where the afternoon light cast a golden glow. Marcus set up his phone on a small tripod and adjusted the frame to capture both of them on the worn floral couch. "Just be yourself, Grandma. Talk about how your faith carried you through the hard times." Miss Ellie smoothed her dress, suddenly self-conscious. "I don't know about all this video business." "Trust me," Marcus said gently. He pressed record and asked his first question. "Can you tell me about your first march? Were you scared?" Miss Ellie's eyes grew distant as the memories returned. Terrified, she admitted. It was 1965. I was just 18. My mama begged me not to go, but my daddy said sometimes you have to stand for something even when your knees are shaking. As she spoke, her voice grew stronger. She described the tension in the air that day, the sea of determined faces, the prayers they whispered together before stepping onto Edmund Pettus Bridge. We weren't just marching for voting rights, she explained. We were marching for dignity. For the right to be seen as human beings. Marcus listened, transfixed. He'd heard pieces of these stories before, but never with such raw emotion. His grandmother described the water hoses, the police dogs, the nights spent in jail cells singing hymns to keep their spirits up. What kept you going back? Marcus asked. After all that violence, Miss Ellie smiled softly. Faith, baby, not just in God, though that was the foundation. Faith in the future. Faith that America could be better than it was. Faith that my children and one day my grandchildren would live in a world where they were judged by their character, like Dr. King said. The interview continued, with Miss Ellie sharing how her faith had sustained her through her husband's death, through raising a daughter alone while working 2 jobs, through watching her neighborhood decline as factories closed and opportunities dried up. Even in the darkest times, she said, her eyes fixed on Marcus, faith gives you a light to walk toward. It's not about waiting for miracles. It's about believing that your actions matter, that goodness matters, that love is stronger than hate. As the interview wound down, Marcus noticed Miss Ellie rubbing her left arm, her forehead beaded with sweat despite the cool room. Grandma, you okay? Just a little tired, she said, waving off his concern. And my arm's been bothering me since yesterday, probably just overdid it with the cleaning. Marcus frowned. Maybe we should call Mom or go to the hospital to get it checked out. Hospitals are for sick people, Miss Ellie insisted. I'm just an old woman with aches and pains. But as she stood, Miss Ellie suddenly swayed, her face contorting in pain. Marcus, she whispered, her voice strangely slurred. Something's not right. Marcus barely caught her as she collapsed. Her face drooped on one side and her left arm hung limp. The phone, still recording, tumbled to the floor as Marcus lowered his grandmother onto the couch. Grandma, can you hear me? Marcus fumbled for his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. I need an ambulance, he told the dispatcher, his voice cracking. My grandmother, I think she's having a stroke. The next 15 minutes were a blur of panic. Marcus followed the dispatcher's instructions, checking Miss Ellie's breathing, turning her on her side. All the while, he kept talking to his grandmother, who drifted in and out of consciousness. Stay with me, Grandma, please. Help is coming. When the paramedics finally arrived, they moved with urgent efficiency, loading Miss Ellie onto a stretcher. One of them, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You did good, son. You recognized the signs quickly. That might have saved her life. In the ambulance, Marcus held his grandmother's hand as the sirens wailed. He called his mother at the hospital, his voice breaking as he explained what had happened. I'm in the middle of an emergency surgery, Deanna Johnson said, the stress evident in her voice. I can't leave. Take her to Mercy General. I'll find you as soon as I can. The paramedic shook her head. Mercy's ER is on diversion tonight. We're taking her to County. Marcus relayed this to his mother, hearing her sharp intake of breath. County Hospital had a reputation for understaffing and poor care, especially for patients from neighborhoods like theirs. Stay with her, his mother instructed. Don't leave her alone. Make sure they know I'm a nurse at Mercy. I'll get there as soon as I possibly can. At County Hospital, the emergency room was chaos, stretchers lining the hallways, nurses rushing between patients, the air thick with disinfectant and despair. Miss Ellie was wheeled in and promptly left in a corner, despite the paramedics' insistence that she needed immediate attention. Marcus approached the triage desk 3 times, each attempt more desperate than the last. Please, my grandmother needs help. The paramedics said it might be a stroke and time is critical. The overwhelmed nurse barely looked up. Everyone here needs help, son. The doctor will see her when he can. After 30 agonizing minutes, Dr. Reynolds finally appeared, young, harried, with an air of detachment that made Marcus instantly uneasy. He glanced at Miss Ellie's chart without really looking at her. Probable anxiety attack, he muttered, checking her pulse with perfunctory movements. Common in elderly patients especially. He trailed off, but Marcus caught his meaning. Especially what? Marcus challenged, anger rising in his chest. Dr. Reynolds looked annoyed at the question. Especially in certain demographics. We'll run some basic tests, but I wouldn't worry too much. Probably just need to adjust her medications. The paramedics said it was a stroke, Marcus insisted. Her face is drooping. She can't move her left side properly. I'm the doctor here, Reynolds said coldly. Not you and not the paramedics. We'll get to her when we can. As the doctor walked away, Marcus felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. He looked down at his grandmother, who was drifting in and out of consciousness, her breathing labored. In that moment of desperation, Marcus did the only thing he could think of. He took his grandmother's hand and began to pray. Not silently, but out loud, his voice soft but steady in the chaotic emergency room. "Lord, I don't understand why this is happening," he began, tears threatening to spill. "But I know you're here with us, with Grandma. She's always believed in you, always trusted you through everything. And now I'm asking you to be with her, to heal her, to give these doctors the wisdom to see what's really wrong." As he prayed, Marcus remembered his phone in his pocket, the same one he'd used to interview his grandmother just hours before. Without fully understanding why, he took it out and pressed record, capturing this raw moment of faith in crisis. "Grandma always told me that faith isn't just for the good times," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "It's for moments like this when everything seems hopeless. She marched for justice when people said it would never come. She raised a daughter alone when everyone said she couldn't. She kept our family together through everything this world threw at us." A nurse paused in her rushed movements, listening to the teenager's heartfelt prayer. "So I'm asking you now to be her strength when she has none left, to be her voice when she can't speak for herself, to remind these doctors and nurses that she's not just another patient, she's Elena Johnson, who has lived a life of courage and kindness and faith." By now, several people in the waiting room had turned to listen, moved by the teenager's raw emotion and eloquent words. "And I'm asking you to give me strength too," Marcus continued, his voice breaking slightly. "To be the man she raised me to be, to fight for her the way she's always fought for me, to have even a fraction of her faith right now." When he finished praying, Marcus wiped his eyes and looked up to find several staff members standing nearby, watching him with expressions ranging from curiosity to embarrassment to genuine emotion. The same nurse who had stopped to listen approached him, her eyes soft with compassion. "I'm going to page a different doctor," she said quietly. "Just hang tight." 20 minutes later, a new doctor, Dr. Patel, a woman with gray-streaked hair and determined eyes, arrived and immediately ordered a CT scan and blood work. Within the hour, Miss Ellie was diagnosed with an ischemic stroke and rushed to treatment, hours after she should have been. As Marcus sat alone in the waiting room, he remembered the video still recording on his phone. He stopped it, intending to delete it, this private moment of vulnerability and faith. But something made him hesitate. His grandmother's words from earlier that day echoed in his mind. "Faith gives you a light to walk toward, believing that your actions matter, that goodness matters." On impulse, Marcus opened his social media app and uploaded the video. No filters, no editing, just raw emotion and genuine faith in a moment of crisis. He added a simple caption, "Praying for my grandmother at County Hospital. She taught me that faith matters most when it seems impossible to believe." Faith in the darkness. Then he put his phone away, too concerned about his grandmother to think about who might see the video or how they might respond. Now, 3 hours later, Marcus stood in that same waiting room, watching Dr. Reynolds, the same doctor who had dismissed his grandmother's symptoms, approach with a changed demeanor, telling him that Miss Ellie was asking for him. She exclaimed, rushing to Miss Ellie's bedside. "Thank God!" She hugged her mother gently, then turned to embrace Marcus. "I came as soon as my surgery was finished. How is she really doing?" "The doctors are calling it remarkable," Marcus said. "Almost a full recovery already." Diana looked skeptical. "That's not how strokes usually progress." She examined her mother with a professional eye, checking the monitors herself. "It's not just medical," Miss Ellie said firmly. "It's faith." Diana's expression softened. As a nurse, she believed in science and medicine, but she'd also seen things in her career that defied explanation. "Maybe so, Mom." She turned to Marcus. "One of the nurses at Mercy showed me a video that's going viral, a teenager praying for his grandmother in an emergency room." Her eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Before Marcus could respond, the door opened again. Dr. Patel entered with a tablet in hand, followed by the hospital administrator, a man in an expensive suit who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Johnson," Dr. Patel addressed Miss Ellie, "your latest scans are remarkable. The clot has almost completely dissolved and there's minimal tissue damage." She glanced at Diana. "You're a medical professional, I understand. You know how unusual this kind of recovery is." Diana nodded, her arm around Marcus's shoulders. The administrator cleared his throat. "Ms. Johnson, we understand you're a nurse at Mercy General. I want to personally assure you that we're conducting a full review of your mother's initial treatment. Dr. Reynolds has already submitted a detailed incident report." "I'm sure you are," Diana said coolly, "especially with my son's video reaching millions of viewers." The administrator looked pained. We've been receiving calls from national news outlets about the prayer video and about the care your mother received. Or didn't receive, Diana corrected. We'd like to speak with you privately about how to address this situation, the administrator continued, glancing nervously at Marcus. Miss Ellie's voice cut through the tension. No private conversations, my grandson stays. Mrs. Johnson, the administrator began. Alina, she interrupted. My name is Alina Johnson, not elderly patient, not certain demographic. Alina Johnson. Her voice, though weak, carried the strength of decades fighting for dignity. And I raised my grandson to speak truth just like I raised his mother. The administrator looked from Miss Ellie to Diana to Marcus, clearly calculating the hospital's liability and the potential public relations disaster. What do you want? He finally asked. It was Marcus who answered, surprising everyone. Change, he said simply. Not money, not apologies, real change in how patients are treated. Diana looked at her son with newfound respect. My son's right. What happened to my mother happens to patients like her every day. Symptoms dismissed, concerns ignored, lives risked because of assumptions and biases. I can't fix the entire healthcare system, the administrator protested. No, Diana agreed, but you can fix this hospital, better training, diverse hiring, new protocols for stroke assessment regardless of patient background. Miss Ellie reached for Marcus's hand again. And a community program, she added. Teaching young people about stroke symptoms, heart attacks, diabetes. Knowledge saves lives. The administrator looked as though he wanted to argue but thought better of it. I'll need time to develop a comprehensive plan. Take all the time you need, Diana said with a thin smile. Meanwhile, I'm sure the reporters would love to hear our story. After the administrator and Dr. Patel left, Diana sank into the chair beside her mother's bed. I should have been here, she said, the guilt evident in her voice. You were saving someone else's mother, Miss Ellie told her, just like always. Besides, Marcus added, I handled it. He grinned, trying to lighten the moment. Diana looked at her son, no longer the child she sometimes still saw, but a young man of remarkable poise and character. Yes, she agreed softly. You certainly did. 2 days later, Miss Ellie was moved to a private room, the hospital suddenly finding space that hadn't existed before. The room quickly filled with flowers and cards, not just from family and church friends, but from strangers around the world touched by Marcus's video. Pastor Wallace from their church visited, bringing a stack of prayer requests from the congregation. Your grandmother's always been our prayer warrior, he told Marcus. Now she's got reinforcements from around the globe. Mrs. Tanner, the church organist who'd known Miss Ellie for 50 years, brought homemade bread and tears of joy. When I saw that video, she told Marcus, I knew the Lord wasn't finished with your grandmother yet. Marcus's friends from school stopped by, suddenly treating him differently, not just as the quiet basketball player who made good grades, but as someone with unexpected depth and courage. Even Dr. Reynolds returned, bringing not just medical updates, but a personal story. My grandfather was a civil rights lawyer in Alabama, he told Miss Ellie hesitantly. He always told me to look beyond my biases, to see the person, not the category. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that lesson. Miss Ellie regarded him thoughtfully. Not forgotten, she corrected. Just misplaced for a while. We all do that sometimes with our most important truths. By the 4th day, Miss Ellie was walking the hospital corridors with assistance, her recovery continuing to defy medical expectations. Marcus walked beside her, matching his pace to hers, recording her progress for a new video series he'd started. Faith and Healing, My Grandmother's Journey. You've become quite the filmmaker, Miss Ellie observed as they made their slow circuit. Just documenting what's happening, Marcus said modestly. People want to know how you're doing. They're invested now. It's more than that, Miss Ellie insisted. You're giving them something they're hungry for, hope, authenticity, something real in a world of filters and fakery. As they turned the corner, they encountered a young orderly who recognized Marcus immediately. You're the prayer guy? He exclaimed. Man, my whole family watched your video. My dad actually went to church for the first time in 20 years last Sunday. Marcus smiled awkwardly, still uncomfortable with his sudden fame. Glad it meant something to him. Meant everything, the orderly corrected. Sometimes people just need to be reminded what matters, you know. Later that afternoon, as Miss Ellie rested, Marcus sat in the hospital cafeteria with his mother, both of them exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the past week. The offers keep coming, Diana said, scrolling through emails on her phone. Talk shows, book deals, documentary filmmakers. I don't want any of that, Marcus said quickly. I just want Grandma to get better. Diana studied her son. You know she's going to need changes when she comes home. We might have to think about moving her in with us. Marcus nodded, having already considered this. My room's bigger, I can take the sofa bed in the den. Diana smiled, touched by his immediate selflessness. Let's see what the doctors say first. She hesitated, then added, I'm proud of you, Marcus, not just for how you handled the emergency, but for who you are. Your faith, your compassion, that's who you've always been, even before the world was watching. Marcus looked down, embarrassed by the praise. I learned it from you and from Grandma. Speaking of the world watching, Diana continued, you need to decide how to respond to all this attention. It's not going away. What would you do? Marcus asked. Diana considered this carefully. I'd think about the platform you've been given. What message matters most to you? What change do you want to see? Before Marcus could answer, his phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. Normally, he would have ignored it, but something made him answer. Is this Marcus Johnson? A woman's voice asked. Yes, he replied cautiously. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a producer with National Public Radio. We're doing a special series on faith in America, and your video has sparked an important conversation about how faith intersects with health care, racial equity, and intergenerational wisdom. Marcus listened, skeptical but curious. We'd like to interview you and your grandmother if she's willing, not for sensation but for substance, to explore the deeper story behind that viral moment. Why us? Marcus asked. There are plenty of people with stronger faith, more dramatic stories. Because your story feels authentic, Sarah explained. It resonated across political divides, across generations, across faiths. That's rare these days. Marcus promised to discuss it with his grandmother and ended the call thoughtful. Another media request, Diana guessed. NPR, Marcus confirmed. But different somehow. They want to talk about the bigger issues, healthcare inequity, faith across generations. He looked at his mother. Maybe this is what Grandma meant about actions mattering. Maybe this is a chance to actually change something. Diana smiled, recognizing the fire in her son's eyes, the same determination that had driven her mother to march across that bridge in Selma decades ago. Maybe it is. 1 week after her stroke, Miss Ellie was discharged from county hospital. The same administrator who had tried to sweep the incident under the rug now personally escorted her to the entrance, where a small crowd of well-wishers, hospital staff, church members, and local community leaders had gathered to see her off. Dr. Patel presented Miss Ellie with discharge instructions and a business card. I've written my personal number on the back, she said. Call me directly if you have any concerns, day or night. Dr. Reynolds stood awkwardly to the side until Miss Ellie beckoned him over. Remember what I said about misplaced truths? She asked him quietly. Find yours again, young man. You became a doctor for a reason. Remember that reason. He nodded, unexpectedly moved. I will, Mrs. Johnson. I promise. The administrator stepped forward with a folder. As discussed, these are the details of our new community health initiative. We'd be honored if you would consider serving on the advisory board, Mrs. Johnson. Oh, I'll do more than consider, Miss Ellie assured him with a spark of her old fire. I'll be at every meeting, with my grandson. Marcus helped his grandmother into Diana's car, carefully arranging the pillow behind her back. As they drove away from the hospital, Miss Ellie looked back at the building where she'd nearly died and experienced a recovery that many were calling miraculous. God wasn't finished with me yet, she said softly. Not even close, Marcus agreed. At home, they found Miss Ellie's house transformed. Diana had spent her precious few hours off work cleaning, rearranging furniture to accommodate her mother's new mobility needs, and setting up a temporary bedroom in the former dining room so Miss Ellie wouldn't have to navigate stairs. The refrigerator was stocked with meals from church members. The living room table was covered with cards and letters, some from as far away as Japan and Brazil. Miss Ellie sank into her familiar armchair with a sigh of contentment. There's no place like home. Marcus sat across from her, still watchful for any sign of distress. NPR called again. They want to come tomorrow for the interview. I told them it depends on how you're feeling. I'll be ready, Miss Ellie said with determination. We have things to say. The next morning, Sarah Chen from NPR arrived with a small recording team. Miss Ellie sat in her favorite chair wearing her Sunday best, her Bible on the table beside her. Marcus sat nearby, protective but proud. Ms. Johnson, Sarah began, your grandson's prayer video has been viewed over 20 million times. People are calling what happened to you a miracle. How would you describe it? Miss Ellie considered the question thoughtfully. I'd call it faith meeting opportunity. The miracle isn't just that I survived, though I'm mighty grateful for that. The miracle is that my grandson's moment of raw faith opened so many hearts. Marcus, Sarah turned to him, did you have any idea your prayer would reach so many people? Marcus shook his head. I wasn't thinking about an audience. I was just talking to God about my grandmother, the woman who taught me what faith looks like in action, not just words. The interview continued, touching on Miss Ellie's civil rights background, on the healthcare disparities that nearly cost her life, on the intergenerational transmission of faith and values. "What's next for both of you?" Sarah asked as the interview neared its end. It was Miss Ellie who answered. "We're starting a program at our church, Know the Signs, Save a Life, teaching young people to recognize stroke symptoms, heart attacks, diabetic emergencies, knowledge that might have saved precious minutes in my case. And we're working with County Hospital on their bias training," Marcus added, "using our story and stories like ours to help doctors and nurses see the person, not just the patient." After the NPR team left, Miss Ellie reached for Marcus's hand. "Your grandfather would be bursting with pride if he could see you now." "I wish I'd known him," Marcus said. "He knew you," Miss Ellie replied. "Held you when you were just 3 days old, said you had old eyes and a new soul." She smiled at the memory. "He was right." 2 months later, Miss Ellie sat in the front pew of New Hope Baptist Church, watching as Marcus addressed a packed congregation. The Know the Signs, Save a Life program had expanded beyond their small church to include 4 other denominations in the area, creating an interfaith initiative that had already trained over 500 young people in emergency response. "Faith without works is dead," Marcus quoted from the book of James. "That's what my grandmother taught me long before her stroke. Faith isn't just what we say we believe, it's what we do because of those beliefs." The congregation murmured their agreement as Marcus continued. "When I prayed in that emergency room, I wasn't thinking about going viral or starting a movement. I was just a scared kid asking God to save his grandmother." His voice caught slightly. "But that's how God often works, taking our most vulnerable moments and using them in ways we never imagined." From her seat, Miss Ellie beamed with pride. Her recovery had been remarkable. The physical therapy, the medication, the constant support from family and community all playing their part. But she knew that something transcendent had also been at work, something that medical science couldn't fully explain. After the service, as people gathered in the fellowship hall for refreshments, Dr. Reynolds appeared at the door, looking uncomfortable in a suit instead of his white coat. Marcus spotted him first and nudged his grandmother. "Invite him in," Miss Ellie instructed. "Church is for sinners, not saints." Marcus approached the doctor. "Glad you could make it." "I wasn't sure I'd be welcome," Dr. Reynolds admitted. "You're here, that matters." Inside, Dr. Reynolds found himself warmly received by the congregation, many of whom had heard the story of Miss Ellie's initial misdiagnosis and subsequent miraculous recovery. There was no accusation, no coldness, only the genuine welcome of a community that understood redemption. "Dr. Reynolds has been instrumental in changing protocols at County Hospital," Marcus explained to Pastor Wallace. "All stroke symptoms are now treated as time-critical emergencies, regardless of patient demographics." Pastor Wallace nodded approvingly. "Repentance isn't just saying sorry, it's changing direction." Across the room, Miss Ellie was deep in conversation with a young mother whose child had recently been diagnosed with a heart condition. "Faith doesn't mean you stop fighting," she was saying. "It means you never fight alone." As Marcus observed the scene, his grandmother dispensing wisdom, Dr. Reynolds finding acceptance, community members sharing their own stories of crisis and belief, he felt a deep sense of rightness. This was the ripple effect of that raw moment of prayer captured on video, not fame or attention, but connection and change. Sarah Chen from NPR, who had returned to do a follow-up story, approached Marcus. "Your video has now been viewed over 50 million times," she told him. "It's been translated into 27 languages. What does that mean to you?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "It means people are hungry for authenticity, for real faith that meets real challenges. Not polished performances or empty words, but the messy, beautiful truth of believing even when it's hard." As he spoke, Marcus noticed his mother arrive, still in her Mercy General scrubs after finishing her shift. Diana made her way through the crowd, stopping to greet church members and check on her mother before reaching Marcus's side. "Sorry I'm late," she said, kissing his cheek. "Emergency came in just as I was leaving." "You're never late," Marcus assured her. "Just right on time for your part of the story." Later that evening, as Marcus helped his grandmother prepare for bed in her new bedroom setup, Miss Ellie reflected on the journey of the past months. "When I was marching in Selma," she said, "we had no idea how history would remember us. We were just doing what needed doing, putting one foot in front of the other, believing it mattered." "It did matter," Marcus said, arranging her pillows the way she liked them. "And so does this," she replied, touching his hand. "This quiet moment between grandmother and grandson, this small church program teaching kids to save lives, this doctor learning to see patients as people, These ripples matter, Marcus. Don't ever forget that. I won't, he promised. As Miss Ellie drifted towards sleep, Marcus sat beside her bed, thinking about faith and legacy, about viral moments and lasting change. He thought about the video that had started it all, not the polished project he'd planned for his social studies class, but the raw, unfiltered moment of crisis and belief that had somehow touched millions. He pulled out his phone and opened the original video, watching his younger self from just 2 months ago, terrified, desperate, yet holding on to faith. The comments continued to pour in daily. Watching from a hospital room in Tokyo, finding courage in your faith. My grandmother raised me too. Called her after seeing this. We talked for the first time in years. I'm a medical student. This video will make me a better doctor someday. Marcus smiled, understanding now what his grandmother had always tried to teach him. Faith wasn't just about personal comfort or private belief. It was about how we show up in the world, how we treat each other, how we face our darkest moments with courage and hope. He looked at Miss Ellie, now sleeping peacefully, and whispered, "Thank you." Not just for surviving, but for showing him what it meant to live a life of purpose and faith. Outside, the night was still and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. Marcus stepped onto the porch, breathing in the cool air, feeling both older and newer than he had been before all this began. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Reynolds. Committee approved full funding for the Community Health Initiative today. Your grandmother's vision is becoming reality. Marcus texted back a simple thank you, understanding that gratitude was a form of faith too, acknowledging gifts received and possibilities yet to come. In the quiet of the evening, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a Sunday dinner and a simple school project. His grandmother's stroke, the viral prayer video, the medical miracle, the community mobilization, all of it woven together into a tapestry of meaning and purpose. He thought about what Sarah Chen had asked him earlier. What does 50 million views mean to you? The answer came to him now, clearer than before. It wasn't about the numbers or the attention. It was about the connections formed, the hearts opened, the changes sparked. It was about faith finding new expressions in a digital age, bridging generational divides, speaking timeless truths in contemporary language. As Marcus looked up at the stars, he felt a profound sense of peace and possibility. His grandmother had survived to continue her work in the world. He had found his voice and purpose. And somewhere out there, millions of people had been touched by a moment of authentic faith in a time of crisis. The future stretched before him, full of uncertainty but also promise. Whatever came next, Marcus knew he would face it the way his grandmother had taught him, with courage, with compassion, and with unshakable faith that even the smallest actions could create ripples of change across the world. Now back to where we started, in that hospital waiting room where Marcus first learned that his grandmother would survive. That moment wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. The beginning of a journey that would transform not just one family, but an entire community and beyond. As Marcus stood by his grandmother's hospital bed that night, holding her hand and marveling at her recovery, he couldn't have imagined how far their story would reach or how many lives it would touch. He was simply grateful for the miracle before him, the grandmother who had raised him, taught him, and shown him what faith looked like in action, now given a second chance to continue her work in the world. And perhaps that was the greatest miracle of all, not just that Miss Ellie had survived against the odds, but that her legacy of faith and courage would live on through her grandson and through the countless lives touched by their story. A black teenager's viral video on faith had indeed moved millions, not just to emotion but to action, to connection, to change. In the quiet hospital room, as machines beeped steadily and Miss Ellie slept peacefully, Marcus whispered a simple prayer of gratitude. Thank you for second chances, thank you for ripples, thank you for faith that matters. Outside the window, the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of possibility. A new day, a new chapter. A story still unfolding, one ripple at a time. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments.